My plan to trap my husband with a sex tape worked, but I didn't expect his revenge. I should start this post by admitting that I'm not the best person. Some people might even call me a horrible person, and that's why I'm admitting it in the first place, because I know that a lot of you aren't going to try to understand me or read the full story. You'll just read the headline and make your judgments. So before you do, I just wanted to point out that I already know I'm kind of a bitch. Regardless, I still hope that some of you decide to actually read the story and try to understand where I'm coming from before you go running off to the comments to call me all sorts of names. I don't really care what you call me if I'm being honest, but I know that won't be enough to discourage you guys, so I'll just go ahead and start my story. Before everything happened, I'd been cheating on my husband for a few months. The flirtation that had been growing between me and my neighbor had been going on for almost a year, but the actual cheating was only for a few months. You might think there's no point in revealing that, but I want to get my facts straight since I've already decided to do this. I didn't want to cheat on my husband, not in the beginning anyway, and I didn't want to do all the worst things that came after, but I had to. I was only trying to protect myself, and I hope that in sharing this with you all, you'll be able to see why, since no one else around me understood. All that said, let's start things from the beginning so this can all make a little bit of sense. My name is Lila, female, 29, and I met my husband, Billy, male, 34, when I was working as a waitress. My parents didn't have enough money to send me to college, and I'd never gotten the best grades in school or been all that interested in studying. So to no one's surprise, I didn't get any scholarships or grants or anything. I'd always known that I would never go to college because my parents had hammered it into my head since I was a kid. They just couldn't afford it. We weren't middle-class people who did all right for themselves. No, we were very poor and just scraping by. Like I said, I wasn't too into the whole school thing, so not going to college didn't seem like the end of the world to me. I didn't have any interest in medicine or law or any of the other basic, expected professions. I did, however, love to cook, and that was what led to me working in the food service business. I wanted to make enough money to afford going to culinary school someday while still working in an area that felt familiar. So I started as a dishwasher right after high school in this pretty fancy, foreign name restaurant, and eventually I got promoted to waitress. That was when I met Billy. He was the complete opposite of me. Trust fund kid who had never had to work a day in his life and went into tech as soon as he could, not because it was something he was passionate about, but because he was following in his father's footsteps. He'd come to the restaurant to celebrate landing a big client with his friends, and I watched him stare at me the whole night. At first I didn't think anything of it, but after the fourth or fifth time of catching him glancing my way, I was sure he had a crush on me or was infatuated or something. It was almost cute. He was very nerdy at the time because we were a lot younger, and I can't lie and say I wasn't at least a little attracted to his boyishness. They stayed for a few hours before leaving, and I thought that was the end of it, until a while later, when my shift was over, and I saw him waiting by his car across the street. It turned out that he had waited hours for me to get off work just so he could talk to me. Again, he was a bit awkward and not really my type, but I was flattered. He offered to drive me home, I accepted, and we just hit things off from there. Billy was sweet, and I didn't typically go for sweet guys, so I planned to eventually break things off. But then a few weeks into us dating, he bought me a new phone. He'd known that mine was practically useless at that point, because I had complained to him about it. I didn't think he'd do anything about it, though, so I was pleasantly surprised. Things didn't end there, though. Soon enough, he was showering me with gifts. I never left any of our dates without a new bracelet or a new necklace or something. It makes me sound superficial, I know, but I enjoyed every second of it. It was nice to finally be spoiled after having to work 2 jobs all throughout high school and washing disgusting dishes for almost 4 years after that. I could tell that he had never been with someone as beautiful as I was, or as sexy, and that was why he continued to shower me with luxury things. He was scared I would leave him for someone better. Weeks turned to months, and suddenly we'd been together for a few years. It was amazing, and I was genuinely so thankful to myself for not breaking up with him when I wanted to, because my life took a sharp 180 after meeting Billy. I moved in with him after a few months together, and he was barely around, so I basically had a penthouse worth thousands of dollars all to myself, and we were constantly going on trips and expensive dates. I was living a life I'd only ever dreamed of. So when Billy asked me to marry him a few years in, of course I said yes. Our wedding was pretty extravagant because his mom liked that sort of thing, and I was happy to let her project onto me if it meant getting closer to such a wealthy family. She treated me like I was her daughter, which was understandable since Billy was their only child. She gave me her old wedding dress and was the one who insisted Billy propose with her old engagement ring. She'd even picked out the rings Billy and I had exchanged on our wedding day. Again, I didn't really care. Most of you are probably thinking I'm a gold digger or a social climber, and me telling you that I'm not probably won't change your mind. But I have to clarify that all I wanted was to secure my future. I knew how tough life could be, and I knew that the rug could be pulled from under me at any moment, so I did what I felt I needed to do. Whether I actually loved Billy or cared for his parents was irrelevant to me at the time. Our married life was good when it first started out, but eventually things changed. Something I'm sure most of the married people who read this will understand. In the beginning, things were passionate and great. Billy moved us into this huge house in a fancy gated community, and I was given the grace to spend his money any way that I wanted. The part where things changed happened when he started spending less time at home. I didn't mind at first because of all the benefits I got to enjoy. But then we had a kid, and things got harder because I was the only one taking care of him while Billy was gone almost all day. Eventually, I got bored with the life that I was living. Sure, things were hard when I was a waitress and had to live paycheck to paycheck, but at least I was freer then. I could do whatever I wanted. Stay out late, hook up with random people, drink until I blacked out. But now I was a housewife and a stay-at-home mom. The life I'd carefully set up for myself by marrying Billy and having his baby now felt like a prison. Don't get me wrong, I love my son, more than anything, but it felt like I was suffocating in that house. Even though I had nannies who watched him and took him to school, I still felt stifled, which is why it felt like a breath of fresh air when a new couple moved in right beside us. They were just like us, but in reverse. He was a stay-at-home dad, while his wife was the breadwinner. Things between us were innocent for a long time. He would text me some question related to cooking or about the kids' school, as our kids went to the same school. But over time, I started getting attracted to him, scheduling my day in a way so we definitely run into each other. I made sure that I wore my bodycon dress, which accentuated my curves while I was going to pick my son for school because I knew I would run into my neighbor and he would notice. But he was also a tough cookie. He pretended like I didn't affect him at all, which I knew was all BS, as I know I'm hot. It's not even arrogance, it's just facts. That's how I became a wealthy woman at such a young age. One night when I knew his wife was out on work trip, and Billy was away and our son was spending the night at his grandparents', things became not so innocent. I went to his place with a very expensive bottle of whiskey from Billy's collection, and I should let you all know that it was not a drunken mistake. I wanted to get in bed with him since a very long time. That evening I took my long shower, wore expensive lingerie and my Dior perfume before going to his place. I knew he just needed some encouragement, that's why the whiskey. When I kissed him after his fourth drink, he didn't stop me, and we wound up in bed together. That was bad enough, but what made things worse was that we didn't stop. Months into my affair with the neighbor, I noticed something off about Billy. He seemed withdrawn and distant, and no matter how much poking and prodding I did, I couldn't figure out what was wrong. It wasn't logical, and maybe it was because of my own guilt, but I started to suspect that maybe he had met someone else and he was cheating on me. And then at some point, I started to think that maybe he'd just gotten tired of me, of our life. Maybe he was just realizing what a mistake it was to tie himself down so young. All these thoughts started to circle around in my head with each passing day until it felt like I was going crazy. I started to panic. I believed that the life I'd struggled to build for myself was about to come crumbling down. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I wouldn't expect you to understand if you haven't been in survival mode your whole life like I had. I knew that my son wasn't enough to keep him with me. I mean, we've all heard stories about men who left their wives and kids for a barely legal girl they claimed to be in love with. It would have been stupid to think I was immune to that, so I knew I had to make a plan. I needed something threatening, something serious that would make him unable to even think about leaving us. I knew that both him and his dad were big in the tech world, and that their reputation was very important. So I decided that blackmail was the only way. After thinking about it for a while, I decided to record a sex tape. of me and Billy, not the neighbor. I set up my phone on the nightstand in a way that wouldn't be too suspicious and recorded everything. I was hesitant at first. Maybe I wanted proof that he was actually cheating or planning to leave first, but after a few days, I realized that I couldn't keep sitting on the fence. It was dangerous for me to wait for so long, knowing that he could whip out divorce papers or tell me that he was moving out to go live with his mistress at a moment's notice. The final nail in the coffin of my indecision was when I'd noticed some missed calls from a Mr. Smith on Billy's phone. I knew that Mr. Smith was their family lawyer, and seeing that he was in contact with him made me panic even more. I knew that there was no time to waste, so about a week after recording the sex tape, I confronted him with it. He was, as expected, confused, and so I explained to him that if he threatened to leave me or made any moves to get a divorce and take everything away from me, I would make sure to post the video all over the internet. Of course, I knew that a video like that wouldn't be good for me. I'd no doubt be shamed publicly for it, but the backlash would be nowhere near what Billy and his dad would face, so it was clear to me that the benefits outweighed the risks, and that this would ensure my continued lifestyle. It would be a pretty big scandal, one that would affect the rate at which Billy got clients and made money, so he understood that it was a serious threat. His company was gearing up to go public, and any scandal could derail the process. He accepted my terms with a defeated look on his face and on the condition that a copy of the video be sent to him, which I agreed to because I didn't think anything of it. There were moments when I felt guilty. He was still my husband after all, and the father of my son, but I understood that the world was a mean place, and sometimes you had to be twice as mean just to keep your place in it. This, as you can imagine, fractured Billy and I's relationship. He was a ghost around the house, and what was left of our romance quickly fizzled out. That, and the inflated ego that I got after successfully pulling off my plan, was what made me continue my relationship with the neighbor. I had felt like I'd won, like I'd gotten everything I'd ever wanted, since I now wore the pants in the relationship and could dictate the way I wanted things as I pleased. It felt only right that I should also be allowed to eat my cake and have it too. So I continued my affair while Billy became little more than a shadow in his own home. It would make me sound better to say that I felt bad or guilty, but what would be the point of telling this story if I was just going to lie? I didn't feel remorse or anything like that because I thought that Billy was going to ruin things for me, and all I'd done was protect myself. It was the safe thing to do, and I'm sure that it would have been what anyone else in my shoes would have done. I should have been suspicious of how easily Billy gave in, of how willing he was to agree to my demands. He didn't even question why I, who'd been a loving, doting wife up until that day, would do something like that to him. And I, blinded by my pride and self-confidence, didn't think to question, much less look into his acceptance. This new order between us continued for a few months. I was free to do and spend as I pleased, and Billy continued his absence from the house. Only this time I wasn't worried because I knew that there was no rug to pull out from under me. I had taken care of everything. Or at least that was what I thought, until one day after picking up my son from school and leaving him at home with his favorite nanny, I decided to treat myself to a spa day. I had been feeling a bit stressed at the time and thought that I deserved a bit of relaxation. Everything came crashing down when I tried to pay for all the treatments and massages I'd gotten, but my card declined. It was the first time that had happened in years, and I felt a familiar shame creep inside me. I'm sure my cheeks were red from embarrassment as I tried to explain to them that something must be wrong with their system. Luckily, that was where I got all my treatments done, so they trusted me. I'd had free access to all Billy's accounts for years, so I didn't make it a habit of keeping cash on me, but luckily I had a few $100 in my purse, so I gave that to them and left. I tried not to panic as I drove home, but I couldn't help it. I couldn't help feeling like something was terribly wrong, and it made me feel nauseous. I started to calm down when I realized that I'd probably just maxed out one of Billy's cards. I'd done it before, and his response was always to just deposit more money in or give me a new one. I knew that he probably wouldn't be home when I got back, so I decided that I'd just ask him for more money or a new card when he came home that night. There was nothing to be worried about. That was what I tried to tell myself. Only Billy was home when I got back, and to my horror, both my son and his nanny were gone. To make matters even worse, Mr. Smith was sitting at our dining table, looking smug and like he knew something that I didn't. Before I could even ask what was going on, Billy asked me to sit down. On the table was his tablet and a few folders. It felt like I was experiencing déjà vu. It was eerily similar to when I had blackmailed him with the sex tape. Confused and wanting answers to what the hell was going on, I sat down and waited for either of them to speak. Billy spoke first, and as I listened, I felt my heart sink to my stomach. He explained that he had known from the beginning that I'd been having an affair because there were cameras installed all around the house, cameras that he usually checked. He'd seen me sneaking him into the house using the backyard door and us kissing on the couch before taking things upstairs. To add to that, he'd also come home early one evening and had found the house completely empty, even though my car was in the driveway. So he drove a little down the street and waited so he could watch me leaving the neighbor's house and know for sure that I'd betrayed him. I tried to defend myself, to explain things in a way that would maybe take away some of the blame from me, but Billy calmly held up his hand and told me that he wasn't done. If my heart could sink any longer, it would have, as I wondered what else could be in store for me. He revealed that he'd been planning on getting a divorce and had set things in motion months after the affair became sexual. But he and his lawyer were having trouble trying to figure out a way for him to prove the infidelity and ensure that he got custody after the divorce when I had, like a fool, threatened him with the sex tape. He unlocked the tablet and pressed play on a video. It was a copy of the sex tape I'd sent to him, but I sat up in my seat when I noticed that something was different about it. It had been digitally altered so that while my face was clear as day, Billy's features could barely be made out. I started to really panic then. The sex tape had been my trump card, my one true sense of security against him. I tried to one-up him by telling them that I still had copies of the original video, but Mr. Smith explained, with the excitement of a child on Christmas, that Billy had managed to delete the video on my phone weeks ago while I was distracted. Billy then chimed in and told me that he knew me, knew how lazy and arrogant I was, and knew that I probably never even made copies in the first place. Unfortunately, he was right. I'd been so confident in my plan that I hadn't bothered, and after Billy had just accepted the way he did, I just assumed that I would never need to, since I'd gotten all I'd ever wanted. I had been prideful and stupid, and now it had come back to bite me in the ass. Billy pushed the documents over to me and encouraged me to read them. They were divorce papers, ones that he had already signed and that cited infidelity as a reason for the separation. There were also tons of printed out messages between me and my neighbor, ones that clearly showed that I was cheating on Billy. Billy explained that he'd spoken to the neighbor and that he had handed over the texts in exchange for Billy not telling his wife about me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Couldn't believe that I'd allowed myself to be outplayed and outsmarted to this extent. But unfortunately for me, my punishment wasn't over yet, because amongst those documents was also the prenup that I'd completely forgotten that I'd signed. It had been when we were still discussing marriage in those earlier years, and I remember his mom encouraging me to sign it without fully understanding what it was. Of course, I knew now exactly what it was that I was looking at and exactly what it meant for me. If the divorce went through, which it would given the mountain of evidence Billy had against me, I'd be left without a penny to my name. I'd spent all these years swimming in wealth and had never bothered to save some or invest it into anything. I was so sure that a day like this would never come, but there I was, staring down at everything that would end me. I couldn't sign those papers. I knew that no matter what I did, I couldn't sign those papers. My life would be over if I did, and I couldn't allow that. Not after how hard I worked, after how much I'd struggled and clawed my way to get there. I told them just as much, but they didn't even flinch or react. Instead, Mr. Smith told me that if I didn't sign the papers, I would lose my son. I was horrified, and I turned to Billy to ask him what he was talking about as I started crying, but Billy, the man who I'd called my husband for so many years, didn't seem to care about my tears or how distraught I looked. He said that when he filed for custody, which he was going to do very soon, it was very likely that his influence, money, the evidence he would give the court, and my lack of employment would make sure that he got full custody of our son. But if I signed the papers, he would make sure I, at least, got partial custody with supervision. I sat there staring at those papers for what felt like hours as I contemplated what to do. On one hand, I would lose everything, and on the other, I would lose my child. I'd thought I had everything figured out. Meanwhile, I'd only helped them back me into a corner. If Billy got full custody, I could file against it, but I didn't have a job. I wouldn't have a house after the divorce, and my life was hardly stable. There was no way that I would win. I thought about it and what good it would do to me seeing my son if I couldn't keep buying new clothes when I wanted. I told him as such, and the smirk on his face told me that he expected me to say exactly this. He told me I just proved that I didn't care about anyone else except me. He told me he could easily get a divorce if I didn't sign and left, and now he will make sure that I don't get custody of my soon. Before they left, Billy told me that I had a week to pack my things and leave the house. That was the last thing he said to me. That was how we ended our marriage. His lawyer assassinated my character in court. They said I was not a woman of a good character, and I didn't have any financial security. They also showed images of me having wine in my silk robe with my neighbor. The judge agreed that my actions could have a bad impact on my son, as he was of growing age, and that was that. It's been a month since then, and I'm currently living with my parents again. Billy has complete custody, so I can't even see my son. I'm working as a waitress again. Thankfully, not in the same restaurant. I couldn't bear the shame of that. It feels like everything has gone back to the way they were before I met him. I'm back to barely scraping by, and not only do I have to bear the humiliation of Billy leaving me, but also of living with my parents again. I unknowingly dug my own grave, and Billy and his lawyers have buried me in it. Is there any way to come back from all of this? Or have I ruined my life completely?